And welcome to the Action Network Fantasy Flex Podcast. I am your host, Chris Raybon, joined as always by Sean Koerner. And today we have a very, very, very special guest, a guy that I always love talking to, a guy that you guys really enjoyed. I think it was our most listened to episode last year. So running it back with Jake Ciely, senior writer from The Athletic. Jake, thanks for joining us, man.
Oh, of course, you're too kind. And I like hearing that, the most listened to podcast. That makes me feel good. It makes me feel a little self-important over here. Not that I needed more of that, as everybody already knows.
Yeah, your metrics check out, Jake.
They do. They do. You ran the analysis and you checked out. Did you check my 40 time on top of it? That might be disappointing.
I didn't, but I have confidence you're just a ball player. Like, regardless of the measurables, you just know how to play football.
I appreciate that. My shuttle was good. My 40 time, not so much. My bench was okay, but yeah.
Oh, man. Jake, thank you so much again for joining us. Sean, what's going on with you? How are your metrics this fine afternoon?
I'm doing well. Excited to talk, running back two tier with Jake. This is probably the third season we've had him on to talk about David Montgomery. That's why I'm repping the Bears hat today. I feel like this is a David Montgomery episode every year. So can't wait. And so what's the deal with your throwback jersey? What do you got today?
I got the Peyton Manning Tennessee. I don't have too many college jerseys, so thought I would break this one out. They don't make a ton of them that you can really find. So really excited to get this one and break it out for the pod.
Nice.
All right,
gorgeous.
guys.
Gorgeous.
Thank you. I'm excited about this pod because this is essentially like the frozen pond tier episode that, Sean coined the term a few years ago, but essentially like a lot of these running back twos, they're guys that maybe had a strong finish to last year or, something just not always going to be comfortable with a lot of these guys. And so really important tier to talk about. So I do want to jump right in, but before we do that, Jake, I got to start by asking you more generally, what is your running back strategy for 2021?
Yeah, so my running back strategy really hasn't changed ever. I know every single year there's a talk about all the different terms and all the strategies to go forth with everything, but it's always been, I've been running back heavy. Whether you want to call it get one bell cow or bell cow running back or elite running back or whatever you want to call it, I want to come out of the first two rounds with at least one running back I can trust. Bell cow in fantasy terms, somebody that I know is going to give me a double-digit floor with the potential to hit 20+ every single week. And if I can come out of the first three rounds, I love that more often than not. Now, I'm not going to say that I won't ever not come away with a running back in the first round. If the first 9 picks are running backs and I'm sitting there at the turn with like a Kelsey Adams option on my table, like it's going to be hard to pass on that. So I'm not so beholden to my strategy that I'll never veer from it if the value is there. But just more often than not, my success over my years has always come from getting those running backs early. Even the one year, if you guys want to remember, go back, the one year I took CJ Anderson in the first round and Justin Forsett in the second when he got hurt, I still won that league. That was an industry league too, because I just being able to build that team. But especially today with the running back depth is being so thin. And on the flip side, we keep saying it every single year about wide receivers, that it's getting deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. I don't know what the cutoff is going to be when we finally stop saying that, but it's just so much easier to find that I want to get at least one elite running back, especially, as you guys know, if you just look at last year when everybody's chasing the Samaje P. Ryans and Salvin Ahmeds of the world. I just don't want to be doing that in week 14 with my playoffs on the line.
And Jake, that's a very interesting point, because you mentioned that you're okay with going like perhaps even 3 running backs in the first 3 rounds. At what point, I guess, do you think the sweet spot start hitting for the other positions if you're going running back heavy early? Like, are you kind of hammering wide receiver in that 4 through 8 range? When are you taking a tight end? When are you taking a quarterback?
Yeah, the funny thing is this year in a lot of drafts, I've been coming out with a third running back before the end of the 6th round often. So I've actually had 3 running backs because there's a lot of guys we're going to be talking about on this show that start falling into that range. And you know what? And that flex spot with the upside that they bring, I think it's warranted to go after that, because when you talk about hitting those wide receivers, ooh, there's been a lot, I know you guys have seen this on Twitter. There's been a lot of people talking about now they're calling it the RB dead zone. Somebody wrote an article about that 4th, 5th round where a lot of the running backs don't hit. Some of the guys we're going to be talking about on this show. And so I'm hitting wide receiver in that range because on top of that, we're talking about fringe wide receiver ones are still sitting there. And I talked about, obviously they're not the top 10 options, but you're talking about that 10 through 20 who all have the upside to finish inside the top 10 because it just takes, a slightly better season, a slightly better breakout quarterback play, whatever it might be. Tight end is always going to be interesting for me. I will never, like I brought up Kelsey earlier, I'll never be the Kelsey guy. I've taken him at the end of the 1st round. I'll never be like, go for it, because I know the advantage he gives you at tight end. But if he just has a 2019 season, which was still amazing, when you're only 0.1 ahead of Kittle, and maybe it's 0.1 ahead of Waller and Kittle, or maybe even Pitts this year, what you sacrificed at running back or wide receiver to make that move, you've now kind of doubled down on your lost value. Again, it can obviously work. He's got a terrific floor. I'm just more of the guy that I kind of hit in that 5th, 6th round. And if I miss, and I say 5th, 6th round, that's if a Pitts falls to there, if a Hawkinson is there, if a Mark Andrews is there. And if I miss on those guys, I'm just going to wait. And I mean, wait. I never want to get into that next group because year after year, that next group just continues to bomb. It's that basically tight end 7 through 11 or 12. They just bomb every single year. And we're finding the Logan Thomases, the Tanyans of the world. And this year, there's a lot of great value that you can find towards the end of the draft at the tight end. So I am hammering wide receiver mostly. So after the first 3 rounds, there's a lot of wide receivers that populate my team basically from rounds 4 through about 9.
Yeah, and I like kind of what you said about, having that 3rd running back at least after the, by the end of the 6th round, because it kind of, you have to accept that your guys are going to get injured, and maybe even your 1st round running back or your RB1 will get injured. But if you have 2 strong RB2s with RB1 upside, a lot of times that can kind of compensate for that, which is probably what you're alluding to when you mentioned, drafting Forsett one year and Anderson another. And, like if you're hammering the position, as long as you're still, you're not over picking on, the onesie positions, quarterback and tight end, you could still build a deep receiving core, but you'll have that, you'll have those extra startable games for running backs. So that's how I like to think about fantasy, is like, how many startable games will this guy give me? How many plus games will this guy give me? And running backs already miss twice as many games as other positions. So you're already going to need, more at that position than others. So one
that ties in too is just to jump in and go real quick. So on the site, I did customizable projections. If everybody hates my projections, you can change them this year. But there's a ranking set that I put it out. It's VORP. This comes from Dom on the Athletic site, but it's value of relative position. So you take your replacement player or a value over replacement player, whichever way you want to say it. But it's basically looking at the replacement player and how much of a boost is this player. So the reason I end up taking a 3rd running back is because often in that 5th, 6th round, granted, it often ends up being a dead zone, is at the same time, when you're looking at the running backs on the board, there are some guys that are the lead of a split backfield. There are some guys that potentially are the second option with more upside than the guy in front of them. And you're looking at the wide receivers on the board, and you can see 2 rounds later, the difference between the wide receivers going in the 6th round and the 8th round is so minimal. Whereas the drop off at running back, when you get to the 8th round, now you're talking about guys who are only pass catchers like the Nyheim Hines of the world, or somebody that are blocked by 2 guys in front of them. So it's that drop off. And that's why a lot of times I will take that 3rd running back.
Sean, how about you? When are you taking your 3rd running back generally in 2021?
So I mean, it all depends on the draft, but I have a similar approach to Jake where, I'm attacking running back at all phases of the draft. So, I want to workhorse early. I want, a high upside running back in the middle rounds as my 3rd running back. And then I'm trying to stash, the high upside backup running backs. I love to hoard those. I like to have like 3 or 4 of those on my bench because, you can bank on maybe one of them popping at a time. But I love just loading up at running back. So I'm not a believer in, zero running back, although I do understand the theory behind it. Running back is a very fragile position. But because of that, I consider my strategy the running back surplus strategy, where I'm just attacking at all levels. And then, quarterback or tight end, when they make sense, I attack those positions. Whereas the wide receiver, it's such a steady decline that I kind of just let those come to me. Jake already mentioned rounds 4 through 8. That's a very popular place for me to be attacking wide receiver. So running back, it's too important to, end up with like a Mike Davis or Chase Edmonds as your number one running back. Like, that's not good. I'd rather have one of those guys as my RB3. I mean, they offer a ton of upside, but you can't be relying on those guys to be your lead running back going to the season. So I like to just load up at running back as much as possible.
Yeah, the guys you draft at running back, even if the first 2 guys you draft, you're going to be using a lot more than just those guys. So, first, because of the missed games, because of just, guys lose their jobs at the position, a lot of things happen at running back where you need to keep hammering it. I agree. I do like to, when I'm done with 8 rounds heading into the 9th, I like to have a balanced team, 4 running backs, 4 wide receivers, because I always know that as long as I have a strong core of wide receivers, there's always going to be guys in the late rounds at different spots that I really like, that are high upside. So I think even getting that 4th running back before you get into the double-digit rounds is important as well. But let's talk about the specific running backs that we are targeting and avoiding. And we will start with the running backs in that RB2 average draft position. So the 13 to 24 range. Jake, who are you targeting in this range?
Yeah, there's a lot in this range that I really love, but if I had to take one, it's funny that Sean just mentioned him, and he said as RB3. I'll take him as my RB2. I love Mike Davis, mostly because I know a lot of people are questioning whether or not he can be the NFL version of a bell cow and the fact that 20 plus touches per game. And I understand that because some people said, oh, he wore down in some games, but there was plenty of opportunities where you saw him perform still well towards the end of the season. I think that kind of wore down, quote unquote, situation is a little overblown. But the biggest reason why is because if you look at that backfield, who else is touching that ball? Yeah, we could talk about Kadri Olsen and all the no, look, it's Mike Davis. And Mike Davis, the other thing he proved last year is not only just stepping in for Christian McCaffrey, but it's the passing game. He's good in the passing game, both as a blocker and a receiver, which if we expect the Falcons defense to be junk, there's not an argument you can make for the Falcons offense that doesn't involve Mike Davis still being there. If they're doing well and running ball offensively well and everything like that, then it's Mike Davis. If they're having to pass, Mike Davis is still going to be involved. So I'm looking at him and I say 300 touches is well within his reach. If you told me 260 is a floor with 300 likely, say absolutely. Again, there's a lot of names I like in this group, but for the fact that he's the bottom of this group on top of it, like I'm a J.K. Dobbins guy, but you're going to tell me J.K. Dobbins at 25 overall RB15 versus Mike Davis is 24 and 54 overall. I'm going to wait for Mike Davis. So I would love to get him as my RB3, and I have in a lot of places, Sean. I just took him in a draft over this weekend. I got him as my RB3 in the 5th or 6th round. But I'll even take him as my RB2 if, I got a wide receiver or 2 early in the first 3 or 4 rounds.
Yeah, J.K. Dobbins is a guy that I feel like you never feel fully comfortable taking him. There's always like some disclaimer, but I actually think he'll probably be fine. Just a talented guy on a run heavy team that's inheriting the lead backfield. But I do like Mike Davis. Every time I, go to my projections, this guy's always higher than I think he's going to be because as you mentioned, there's just not really a lot behind him in that backfield. Even if Allison it becomes an RB2 and gets, what is he going to get? Like 4 or 5 carries a game. Like it's
right.
There's going to be work to be had. And Arthur Smith, pretty good offensive mind. So even though they lost Julio, should still be able to do some things. Sean, who are you targeting in this RB13 to 24 range, starting with guys like Mixon, CEH, Dobbins, Jacobs, Montgomery, Swift, and then Robinson and Davis sneak in at the end?
So this is the 3rd straight season where Chris Carson is my favorite low-end RB2 target. I mean, I feel like I say this every year. I'm projecting him as a high-end RB2 this season. I think he'll benefit from offensive coordinator Shane Waldron's up-tempo offense. I love where this offense is going. He's guaranteed touches in both the running and passing game. Like, you don't have to worry about game script when it comes to him. And, you know, his only downside really is he tends to miss a game or two every year because of his violent running style. But when he was healthy last year, he averaged 15.7 points per game, which ranked 11th among running backs who played 10 or more games. Like, he's going to give you production when he's on the field. He's one of the most reliable guys you can draft. And he typically goes at the end of this running back 2 tier. So once again, I'll be loading up on Chris Carson. And then again, I just have to throw it out there, Kareem Hunt. You know, obviously he's limited due to Nick Chubb's presence, but, you know, even if Nick Chubb were to be healthy for all 17 games, I think Kareem Hunt will return value ADP. But he also has that massive upside in the event that Nick Chubb does miss time. I mean, he's a top 5 running back whenever Nick Chubb is out of the lineup. So I just love having that sort of high floor ceiling combo of Kareem Hunt. Again, as my running back 3, I don't want to be drafting him as, like, you know, my RB2 and leaning on him, but as like an RB3, I mean, he just offers massive upside that I just can't pass up.
Yeah, and it's tough going after you guys because those are my targets. I mean, Mike Davis and Chris Carson, those are the 2 guys that really stand out to me. Just well-rounded players. You know, Chris Carson has been a top 20 PPR back 3 years in a row. He's a guy that, while he can give you, you know, 20 plus carries, he can give you, you know, 4 or 5 catches in a game, but usually he'll be in the mid-teens in carries, around 13, 14. And he'll get a couple catches, but in that offense with Russell Wilson going up and down the field, it's going to be a very concentrated offense. It's going to be Metcalf, it's going to be Lockett, and it's going to be Chris Carson. And with a quarterback like Russell Wilson, that's just a high floor situation with a high ceiling in any given week. Again, 3 straight top 20 finishes in PPR. And then Mike Davis, it's just a math game. I mean, the Falcons got rid of essentially their they had a trio of backs last year that weren't cutting it. You had Todd Gurley, you had Ito Smith, and you had Brian Hill. All 3 of those guys are gone. Mike Davis was the guy they signed in his place, you know, obviously new coaching regime. So he's going to get a crack at it. And I think he's a guy that he will give you value in the early part of the season. Hopefully he can stay healthy. He's never had a huge carry workload in his career. If you look at his game log, so that could be a positive and a negative. And the other guy I'll mention is a guy that I think people are down on because of reports, and that's Deandre Swift. And I would monitor those reports very closely because remember, like, Dan Campbell's coming to Detroit. This team doesn't have many wide receivers. Jared Goff doesn't like to throw the ball down the field. And you have experience with people on this coaching staff now that, you know, saw Alvin Kamara and what he did in New Orleans. So Swift and Austin Eckler as well, you know, Anthony Lynn, you got that connection. So Swift could be a PPR monster. You just got to make sure he's healthy. But I would monitor those reports very closely because if he's not going to miss time in the regular season and it's just something that's kind of hampering him in camp and he keeps falling down and you can get him, you know, closer to 20, I think that's a really great value for a guy that could put up like a kind of baby Kamara Eckler-like season. Even with Jamal Williams there, I think, you know, people are overthinking Jamal Williams. You know, but if Swift is healthy, you know, year 2 for him, I think it'll be a big year. So those are the 3 guys that I am looking at: Carson, Davis, and potentially Deandre Swift. Jake, there's always a bunch of guys in this tier. It feels like anyway that they're landmines almost, and you kind of got to avoid them. And frozen pond is what Sean calls it. Who are you avoiding fading in this RB2 tier?
Yeah, there's 2 that kind of stand out for me. Miles Sanders, and I'm not trying to be like, oh, look at me or whatever. I was off Miles Sanders even before the recent news about Boston Scott because this team, the Eagles, have told us nothing by their actions more than they are concerned with his passing game work from last year, which we saw. He was part of the problem. Yes, the team was a mess, but this team's actions have told us that's the part of the things you have to watch is like their offseason, what they're planning, what they're doing, who they're bringing in, signing, drafting, and stuff like that. And everything they've done has told us they're not not 100% confident in Miles Sanders bouncing back. So I have hesitancy on him being inside the top 20, but the bigger one is David Montgomery near the side of the top 15. Look, I'm not even talking about that 5-game stretch at the end of the season where he had the cakewalk of cakewalks when it talks about facing defenses. It's volume. It's a numbers game. You talked about the reason part of it was saying about Mike Davis is the numbers and volume. And what do we want in fantasy? I don't care if it's running back, quarterback, wide receiver, or tight end. We want volume. And it's not even Tariq Cohen because Tariq Cohen's not even healthy yet. It's, you know what? Honestly, Damien Williams is a bigger threat than if Tariq Cohen was healthy because Tariq Cohen is basically one-dimensional. He's the pass-catching option, which would be a concern for David Montgomery because some of his volume would be lost. If Tariq Cohen's not ready and Damien Williams is the backup, remember everybody with Damien Williams last year before he opted out for that season. He is a pretty complete running back, and it's just the fact of David Montgomery with Damien Williams behind him, even if it's Tariq Cohen, both of them, that volume. I just don't see David Montgomery as good as he looked. Again, part of it was the schedule, but part of it is David Montgomery too. I don't hate the guy, but you're asking somebody that's inside the top 20 who even losing 10% of his workload week in and week out is going to be tough for me to get near that. It's not just RB17, it's a top 30 pick. He's early third round. So that's really what it comes down to. I don't hate him. I just hate the cost.
Yeah, it seems like you're kind of taking Montgomery very close to his ceiling. There's not a lot of wiggle room up when you consider that, yeah, he's competing with not only, some of the other backs in that range, but he's got to outscore, legit like wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 types to really pay off his value. So Montgomery is definitely a guy that I'm hesitant on as well. Sean, how about you? Who are you fading in this tier? You see anyone slipping on the frozen pond?
Yeah, I mean, normally I would have a field day with this tier. This is the famous frozen pond tier. Get out of here with that dead zone running back bullshit. Like, this is the frozen pond tier, right? And for some reason, like, I can't hate many of these guys. Like, look at the running back 2 tier last year. It was guys like David Johnson, Le'Veon Bell, Melvin Gordon, Todd Gurley. I mean, we were all saying, don't draft these guys, just fade the position at this point. But when you're talking about guys being drafted in that same range this year, J.K. Dobbins, Josh Jacobs, Miles Sanders, David Montgomery even. I mean, yes, we should be concerned that they could be limited, in the passing game and whatnot, but their ADP already reflects that. All these backs are really good. They're in their prime. And, they have RB1 upside. I don't think they'll all hit, but, they're good backs that you can get the later end of RB2. So, having said that, the only back in this range I probably would fade is James Robinson. I mean, it seems like a no-brainer. They drafted Travis Etienne in the first round, so that's a concern. There's a chance that James Robinson could dominate the early down work, but this Jaguars team is still pretty bad, and they're not going to offer many positive game scripts. So, the James Robinson role might not be that useful, even if he does, start the season as the lead back. But at the end of the day, like, his value is only going to drop as the season goes along. I think Etienne eventually will overtake this backfield, but I don't know why James Robinson is being drafted sort of at the end of this RB2 tier when he doesn't really have the floor ceiling combo that, I'd want. So he's the only guy that I'd probably say I'm actively avoiding from this tier. Other than that, all these guys at ADP, I can get behind.
Yeah. And Joe Mixon is actually 13th now. So he's snuck into this tier in the fantasy pros consensus ADP. So a lot of options here. I'm kind of with Jake on Montgomery and Sanders. Those are the two guys that I see that really worry me. Montgomery, it's just more so I think he's being taken closer to his ceiling. I think last year was the year to draft Montgomery. I just don't see him. I see him either hitting value or coming in below it. Maybe he's a floor pick, but I don't know if he's going to get the same usage in PPR. There was a time last year where he was essentially the only guy playing snaps because they only had Ryan Nall behind him. I don't think Cohen will be ready anytime soon. It may be even a lost year for him, but Damien Williams really does change things for him and worries me. And then Miles Sanders, I mean, Jake, you hit on it. The reports out of camp have just been alarming. I mean, he's been continuing to struggle in the passing game. He's been dropping passes, and they're talking about a full-blown committee, depending on where you look, with him and Boston Scott. And, Boston Scott kind of a forgotten man, but then you remember, okay, the Eagles are changing coaching staffs. You got guys coming over from the Colts who oversaw Nyheim Hines being used very prolifically and as a pretty high snap guy, considering his role and considering they had Taylor there and Matt before that. So I really worry that I really worry that Miles Sanders is going to have to continue to be that uber efficient guy and break those long runs to really come close to paying off a top 20 pick in terms of running backs. Cause I think his passing usage is going down. I don't think Hurts is a guy that's really going to check down the ball to him much. And I just think they may envision a little bit different type of offense with Hurts. And that benefits Scott. And let's not forget they drafted Gainwell as well. So just not a comfortable situation for Sanders. Sean, I'm surprised you didn't mention Myles Gaskin, because I would have thought he would be kind of a frozen pond guy. I don't hate him, but when you look historically at, okay, which running backs in this tier tend to bust, the guys that really don't have much established production or draft pedigree, those tend to be the guys that, kind of fall short. Myles Gaskin, as good as he was, and I think he will probably hold on to the job all year, but it may not be as advantageous as we think it is. And it may not be worth a pick over a guy like Kareem Hunt and Mike Davis and Daryl Henderson and guys like that. So Gaskin is a guy I don't love. Fading him is strong. Fading him is more like Sanders and Montgomery, but I'm not getting too much of Gaskin either. Now let's go to the next tier. That's the running backs in the 25 to 36 range. Jake, I know this is kind of your bread and butter. Give me some guys you like in this tier.
Similar to Sean before, like I want so many of these guys in this range. The big three that stand out to me are Henderson and then the teammates from college, rookies, and Williams and Carter. But I'm going to save Carter for later, and I'm going to go just right back to the first one I mentioned, Henderson. Emory Hunt, who I've known for a while, I think is one of the best scouts in the business, if not the best. He coined a phrase and he calls it smooth brain thinking, is when, because the ridges are supposed to be where your thoughts and the synapses are and all that type of stuff. So smooth brain is you're not thinking. So for this entire time, we're sitting here and like Daryl Henderson's an amazing talent if he could just stay healthy. And then we head into this season, it's, hey, Daryl Henderson is one of the best backups to draft, and he could even have some standalone value if they unleash him this year and all that. And then Akers goes down, and instead of everybody just immediately going, well, Daryl Henderson time is here. Finally, Daryl Henderson. They're like, well, maybe it's Xavier Jones. Maybe it's Raymond Calais. It's like the answer's in front of you. Daryl Henderson, if healthy, is a terrific talent. Is he somebody that can be a 20-plus touch per game guy? No, but neither is Austin Eckler. There's a lot of running backs that are in this mold where they can do very well in a 14 to 18 touch range. And I think that's Henderson's bread and butter. And if just healthy in this offense under Sean McVay, with everything we've seen what this team can do for even aging, broken down running backs, I think Daryl Henderson, if we see at least what I expect in the preseason, by the time we get to the end of August, I have a feeling he's going to be inside the top 20 where he deserves to be. Yeah, I love Daryl Henderson. We'll talk more about him, but Jake, was that it for you? Just Henderson? Yeah, I want to save Carter for one of your questions later. Actually, I don't have Javonte Williams for a later one. The quick version on that is when they drafted him, I said by week 6 or 7, he should take that backfield over, similar to Miles Sanders' rookie season. Melvin Gordon's opened that door even more by waiting this long to finally show up. So Javonte Williams might actually be the lead option. At this point, he might even be the lead option by week 1. Yeah, love Williams as well. Love all those guys. So we'll get to them. But Sean, who are you targeting in this RB 25 to 36 range, aka the RB3 range? Well, I mean, Jake stole my guy. It's all about Daryl Henderson here. I mean, how could you not? His ADP really is closer to RB 22, 23 range. I mean, when I'm projecting him right now, I'm factoring in that they will add a veteran running back like an Adrian Peterson or Duke Johnson. And I'm still getting him RB21. And so far the Rams have
hold true to their promise. They haven't added anybody. So if he goes into the season as the lead back, I mean, he's going to be a steal at this price. So, looking back at last year, he was the RB17 weeks 1 through 8, even when Malcolm Brown was healthy and Cam Akers was in and out of the lineup. So, I mean, he already flashed his upside. And, this offense should be a lot better with Matthew Stafford. So, he has some more touchdown upside in this offense. So you can't go wrong with Daryl Henderson. Even if they do add a veteran, like he'll probably still be a low end RB2. So that's why I think he's a safe bet right now. The other guy is probably Chase Edmonds. There's a little bit of risk. James Conner could inherit the full Kenyon Drake role we saw last year, which will hurt Edmonds' upside, of course. But James Conner has never been able to stay healthy. He's already dealing with setbacks with his offseason toe surgery. So, if he only ends up playing 6 or 7 games this year, Chase Edmonds is going to hit at this ADP at RB27. So I'm, it's well worth taking a few shares of Chase Edmonds here. I think he has a ton of upside. He's shown in the past, when he's the lead back, he can put up serious numbers, pushing RB1 upside. And the depth chart behind James Conner is pretty much nil. So I love taking a swing here at Chase Edmonds.
Yeah, and Edmonds has been running as the number 1 running back in camp. That was a role that they kind of earmarked for him, and they were going to give him the first crack at it. So I think Edmonds, he's a guy I was really high on before they added Conner. I've kind of tailed off a little bit. I think the time to get Edmonds was like way early, but I do think there's kind of some post-type appeal now, because this is another guy that is setting up to be a lead back on a pretty good offense. I mean, this Cardinals offense is pretty good. Same reason I like Daryl Henderson. I think, when you look at Henderson and look at what the Rams have, they have a better quarterback now than, a quarterback that's more comfortable and that their coach is more comfortable with. So you're going to get some more deep shots. That could set the backs up for more touchdowns. And I really see it hard to believe at this point that Xavier Jones, Calais, Jake Funk, any of those guys are going to steal significant snaps from Henderson. He's been over 15 carries 4 times last year. The Rams' number 1 running back was right around 15 carries for the year. So you give him a couple catches on top of that, and this guy could really be a strong value considering the offense that he's in. So love Daryl Henderson. I'm kind of with you guys. I don't even know why he's this far down in ADP. I know Fantasy Pros kind of aggregate, so you can't really filter by date the way you can with some other sites, but 25th is too low for Henderson. I think he is a top 20 back. And Michael Carter, that's another guy that I really, really like. Jake, I know you're going to talk about him later, but just a guy who we talked about a little before the show, started airing. He's been running with the ones all camp. He is a guy that can play on rundowns and pass downs. He was in the, top 10 percentile in a lot of grading metrics by PFF in terms of receiving last year. Good, one of the better runners in his class as well. And really, from all the reports, and I know it's puff piece season, so I don't take these, I take these with a grain of salt, but glowing reports. But I think the important thing is that the reports have been that he's running with the ones, and there's distance between him and those other guys, Tevin Coleman, Ty Johnson, LaMichael Pirine. So that's what you want to hear. And I think this, because it's an unknown with Zach Wilson, you got Elijah Moore in this whole new receiving core, basically outside of Crowder. People may be shying away a little bit, but I think Michael Carter could be essentially the centerpiece of this offense that may not be terrible. And even if, the Jets may just be a bad team. And so I think that will help him, because he'll be out there for a good amount of receiving snaps as well. So really like Michael Carter in that RB3 range. Jake, who are you avoiding in this tier?
It's funny because you guys just talk positive. First disagreement we finally get here is I'm off on Chase Edmonds. Now, granted, the original time I wrote my article about the guys with the high ADP I hate, basically he was up at RB 24, so he has slid back a little bit. But at RB27, I'm still looking at about 3 or 4 running backs behind him alone that I would still take, because it's, again, this is what the team has told us. And now this is coming from somebody, similar, you mentioned Swift earlier. I did an article about Swift about don't expect him to be an RB1. He can still be great. I can still love the player and not like the situation. But where people wanted to put him in the RB1 tier, I wasn't there. I think he's, as you mentioned, great as an RB2. It's similar with Edmonds. I talk positively about Edmonds if you go back to my draft profile when he came out of college. The problem with Edmonds is he's always going to be, and I even said this when he came out of college, he's a complementary piece. He's not somebody who's going to touch the ball 20 times per game. And they've had multiple opportunities to let him be the guy. He's only carried the ball over eight times over his career. Now, it's a short career, but he's had more opportunities than just these 3 times. 2 of those games was 27-25. One of them was against the Giants, as everybody remembers that game probably, where he went ballistic. But those, if you look at those 2 games too, is they were kind of forced into that where they had multiple guys hurt in those ones. So it's not that I dislike Edmonds. It's not anything against him. It's just at RB27, when Williams is sitting behind him, who I think can be the lead. When you look at Raheem Mozart, if healthy, which nobody wants anymore because they're just assuming Trey Sermon is going to be the guy. And I'm a Trey Sermon fan, but it's still Mostert until he gets hurt. Somebody else we're going to talk about later, I won't say his name yet. It's just more about the guys behind him. And the biggest part is, you mentioned it, Koerner is back there healthy right now. Yes, Koerner has been hurt basically every year of his career. But if you're going to tell me Koerner down at RB38 versus Edmonds at RB27, to me, they should be almost back-to-back in the drafts. And that's the biggest reason for it.
Yeah, I mean, I do think Edmonds, it kind of varies a little bit based on the scoring system too, because in a full PPR league, I think Edmonds offers some interesting upside, because I do think he'll get more of that, like more of the Kenyon Drake role. And I think he'll still retain his receiving role, but you're right in that he is going to always be, I think anyway, a committee back. That's why they got a James Koerner. So, Cardinal running backs, a lot of these last few years have been tough to predict. I remember that year, David Johnson got benched, and then Edmonds got benched, and then he traded for Drake, and now Drake is gone, and so who knows?
If nothing else, help me drive his price down and get him to the 30s, and then I'll be on him. Let's get him down.
That's where I was on. That's where I was getting him, way early. I was like, oh, this could turn out well, but I do agree. His price, he's kind of been creeping up there a little bit. Sean, who are you fading in the RB3 tier?
So I'm a bit disturbed by Ronald Jones ADP at 30.
Thank you.
What the hell is this, a prank? Especially in half PPR, I don't get it. I can't wrap my head around it. I would draft Leonard Fournette above Ronald Jones. I mean, it's pretty clear that Leonard Fournette and Gio Bernard lower Ronald Jones' floor and ceiling. I just don't get why people are still drafting Ronald Jones. So, moving on from him, I think that, Melvin Gordon and Raheem Mozart, if you kind of mess up and go the 0 running back strategy and you're drafting your week 1 starter right now, go ahead and draft a Melvin Gordon or Raheem Mozart. They're going to have early season value, but their value is going to disappear by mid-season, I think. Jake already mentioned, I think Javonte Williams and Trey Sermon will probably be the starting running backs in the second half of the season. So these are guys that I'm completely avoiding where they're going in the draft, but they do serve a purpose. If you do need a starting running back to start the season, I'm okay with them. But long-term, if we're trying to win a fantasy football league and plan for the fantasy playoffs, you do not want either of these backs.
Yeah, there are just so many guys that kind of stick out as warning signs here. For me, Raheem Mostert is, I'll start with him because I do agree. I think he's going to be in the mix, but ultimately he was always a guy that was a high efficiency guy that never truly was able to handle that, 20 plus carry workload, be it because he got hurt or just because it was just kind of working out better in a committee anyway. And everything we've kind of seen in terms of, because I think it's really important to kind of understand how franchises are thinking and how the front offices are thinking. That's why I love what you do over at The Athletic, Jake, because I think you're very on top of these kind of things. And I just don't think they view him as a guy that's a true feature back, true starting running back. I think you're going to see a lot of Sermon. I think you're going to remember you have Gallman and Mitchell, and you had Wilson, before he got hurt. So there's just a lot of guys here to the point where I think I said it earlier this offseason, Sean. I don't know who to draft in San Francisco, and I'm kind of fine fading everyone. Sermon seems like the most kind of palatable, I guess you could say, choice for me, but I think it's going to be a clusterfuck. And
as always, right? It's always the guy that we don't talk about, so it's going to be Wayne Gallman.
Elijah Mitchell.
Well,
right. I was going to say Elijah Mitchell.
Elijah Mitchell's almost too obvious. It's going to be Wayne Gallman because nobody.
Hey, Wayne Gallman had a better last 2 years than Saquon Barkley. So, it's, aside from a couple of those big Saquon games, like it could be anyone. That's my point.
Right.
I think the idea is to keep Mostert in that, 8 to 10 touch range and go from there. And remember, I mean, I don't like, who knows? Mostert was a very, very good special teamer back in the day. If they have enough running backs, they can always throw him back on special teams. So like you never know.
That's what I always say. It's Kyle Shanahan. He's the Midas touch of running backs. He turns every running back into gold. We wouldn't know Jeff Wilson if it wasn't for Kyle Shanahan. So right. I'm with you guys in the fact, if you just look at the players, who's the most talented running back? Trey Sermon. Yep. We hope that breaks out. And in the 30s, that's reasonable. But to your point, Chris, and I think where we get away from it is if he starts getting near the RB2 range, and now you're drafting, as you mentioned earlier in the show with other players, is you start drafting where now he has to lead. And if Mostert doesn't get hurt, how much is that lead in a percentage basis? So that's where you always got to take that, is you can be in on guys, but don't go so far that you've eliminated any potential return value.
Yeah, because this is the spot you're talking about, 25th through 36. You're essentially looking for guys that fall. You're looking for guys near the back of tiers that can jump some of these other guys because there's going to be a lot of busts in this range. You're looking for those guys that can jump those guys. And, you shouldn't be chasing guys up the draft board in terms of ADP. Ronald Jones is another guy that really sticks out to me.
Obvious.
I mean, and I don't even like Fournette either, because this Gio Bernard signing harkens me back to 2019. Remember in 2019 when everyone was trying to figure out the Bucs backfield, will it be Ronald Jones or will it be Peyton Barber? And you know what happened? It was really neither, because Jones finished outside the top 25, Barber finished outside the top 40, and Dare Ogunbowale pretty much never carried the ball, but played about a third of the snaps and got 45 targets, 35 catches. So it was a three-headed monster. Tom Brady in Tampa had a guy named James White in New England, did not really, Ronald Jones, not really a pass threat. We saw that already. That's why Fournette went from essentially like a healthy scratch to being the key back in the playoffs, because Brady was more comfortable with him. But Fournette's not really a great pass receiver either, or a great passing game back. I mean, he was just kind of pushed into that duty last year, and it worked because you had so many weapons. So it was like no one's covering Fournette when you have Mike Evans and Godwin and Brown and Gronk and, all these guys. So, okay, Fournette had a bunch of catches last year. But I think this is kind of Arian saying, hey, we did this in 2019. Let's do it again with Gio Bernard. And I think that kills both of their values, because Jones is very one-dimensional. He's going to be even more so. And then Fournette, I think, loses some of that receiving upside that really made him pop down the stretch and into the postseason last year. So just like I'm off the Tampa Bay backs. I don't really see a reason to draft those guys. And some I forget who mentioned Melvin Gordon, but yeah, I think his value is going downhill as the season progresses. Definitely do want Javonte Williams. And then David Johnson, another guy, he's RB33. I mean, this Houston team is going to be terrible. This is not the coaching regime that traded one of the best receivers in the game for David Johnson. David Johnson looked broken like 2-3 years ago already. Like, this is just a disaster waiting to happen. You have, Mark Ingram has history with the coaching staff. They brought in Philip Lindsay, who's, a famous kind of committee back that caps the ceiling of the other guy in the committee. And it's just not a good situation. And you got
what
Rex
the crazy
Burkhead.
thing is? You know what the crazy thing is? Did you know that David Johnson was top 15 in fantasy points per game last year?
Yeah, I remember.
It's like you see him on the draft board. He's the epitome of I guess I'll make that pick. That's who he is this year.
Nope. I think last year was the year to draft him. I think last year it was like, okay, we don't really want Todd Gurley here. We know we should avoid Todd Gurley. Who can we kind of get that doesn't feel quite as disgusting?
You're not taking David Johnson in the 8th round.
Well, he had Deshaun Watson as his quarterback last year. He probably doesn't have that this year. So.
That is true as well. So yeah, Tyrod's not the worst. We've seen Tyrod.
He's not the best either, but yeah.
I just think the writing's on the wall for this guy, David Johnson. I mean, again, he hasn't looked good in 2-3 years. He's entering his age 30 season. That is not comforting. And he's literally on what we expect to be the worst team and worst offense and thus worst game script in the league. Now, could he get some receiving work? Sure. But I just don't like the fact that now you even got potentially like a Rex Burkhead who could take over for Buddy Howell, which means another active running back that could eat into the snaps versus Howell, who never played. So it's just a lot.
Right. They're the crappy Bucks. Just stay away from the backfield.
Right. Yeah. The Bucks, we're staying away for different reasons.
But terrible offense, Bucks. Yeah.
No. But Texans, yeah, staying away from all those guys. So yeah, that was a lot of guys. But I think that's where the landmines are this year. It's in that RB3 tier, a little more so than in that RB2 tier, at least for this year. Jake, what about outside the top 36? Who are some guys that you're really keen on that you think could return top 36 value?
Yeah, if you see what I put down there, it's all the Williamses. Even Javonte, if you could, because he's higher up. But if you can give me all 4 Williamses, I'd be happy with that. Because give me Jamal, because it's Anthony Lynn. It's this, it's different regime. And I'm not comparing Jamal Williams to the talent of Deandre Swift as a runner. Deandre Swift was in my tier 1 in his draft, alongside Dobbins and now Jonathan Taylor that year. So I believe in the talent. But this is the one I mentioned in the article is I can love the player and hate the situation. You've mentioned it. Already dealing with a little bit of injury, split backfield, very likely with Anthony Lynn and what's going on there. And what people don't realize about Jamal Williams is he's one of the better pass blocking running backs in the NFL. Is why he sees a lot of field work, which means for everybody that's like, oh, well, the Lions are going to be passing a lot. That doesn't mean it's always necessarily Deandre Swift. And if anything happens to Deandre Swift, we've seen Jamal Williams put up top 15 running back numbers. Granted, it was on the Packers, but I'm just saying you're getting Jamal Williams down at 45 for running backs, 126 overall. And let's talk about the 2 undrafted running backs in Daryl and Damien, who are the backups for their team. One a former Chief and one the new Chief behind Clyde Edwards-Helaire. If anything were to happen to the leads on their team, Daryl Williams and Damien Williams, I don't think necessarily be top 15, but 2 of the higher end backups, in my opinion, maybe not on the level of Latavius Murray, but by far and sure should not be undrafted running backs right now.
Yeah, Daryl Williams is interesting. We'll get to him in a second, but Sean, who are you targeting outside the top 36?
So this feels like cheating because Trey Sermon is number 37 on this list, so I'm gonna have to throw him out there. But we've already talked about him. He's a guy that I like drafting as my RB4. He's probably not going to offer you value at the beginning of the season, but that's totally fine. He's going to be on your bench. So you're saving him for when he eventually does overtake Moser or Mozart gets hurt. But I love his upside. We already talked about how great it is to have a 49ers running back in the Kyle Shanahan scheme. So love taking him. And then as is tradition, I have to mention Latavius Murray is one of my favorite backups to take. Right now, he's the RB46. And, this range, honestly, it all comes down to luck. You need the starter to get hurt. There's real no way to predict that. But he could offer value even if Alvin Kamara were to stay healthy all season. I mean, he finished as the RB33 last year, and Kamara played 15 games. So, he's going to provide you RB3 flex value when you're in a pinch, whether you have like a heavy bye week or have injuries mounting up. Like, he can be a plug and play kind of guy. We kind of know the game scripts when we should play him. So I love him. And, he offers that RB1 upside in the event that Alvin Kamara does miss time. So he's just one of my favorite backs to target in this range just because of his high floor and ceiling combo.
Yeah, Latavius, it just never gets old. And I mean, he's not a very expensive handcuff to Alvin Kamara, who, remember, averages 30 PPR points with Michael Thomas out of the lineup. So I think that handcuff is going to be very important, because I'm actually taking Kamara second in some spots when I can get him. So yeah, don't forget about Latavius Murray. I did want to talk about Daryl Williams for a second again, because I do think it's interesting. Edwards-Helaire, this seems like it could be his breakout year. They're talking about getting him more receiving usage. Williams came on strong down the stretch, but I have been hearing that Jerick McKinnon has been having a very, very good camp. Now, hey, like this is Andy Reid, and like he likes Daryl Williams has been a guy that's, he fills a certain type of role. He's a downhill north-south guy. You can put him in short yardage or whatnot. But McKinnon is more dynamic, and, he can line up, at different spots. He can line up in the slot. He can be kind of a true backup to Edwards-Helaire. So I'm a little off Williams, and I think I'm actually taking some last round dart throws on McKinnon here.
Yeah, listen, like, it's never a bad idea to invest in Chiefs running backs. But Jerick McKinnon always looks good this time of year because he's a freak athlete. But once tackling starts getting involved,
right,
run into some issues.
Yeah, I'm just saying, he's a third Chiefs going. You get it.
Right, yeah. Four games started last year, and it was the first time he had played since 2017. Like, I guess I can't laugh too much because I'm also the same idiot drafting Rashad Penny in the 13th round. So there you go.
Oh man, I'm hearing DJ Dallas is, because remember, they don't like Penny in the pass game for whatever reason. They never have, and I'm hearing DJ Dallas might actually get what amounts to the RB2 role in Seattle, because he's going to be the pass down back if Chris Carson comes out, leaving Penny in no man's land.
And this is why I go running back early, because I'd rather be throwing my darts at wide receivers than these guys who don't even potentially, like Penny, as you mentioned, Penny and Dallas and McKinnon and Darwin and Daryl and all this. Like, I'd rather, okay, even if the lead guy gets hurt, is it just going to be a cluster, as you said before, behind them anyway? So I'd just rather taking those dart throws on like a Jalen Reagor bouncing back in his second year, or a Henry Ruggs bouncing back in his second year, like those kind of guys. I'd rather just be doing that.
And speaking of the starter getting hurt, a couple of guys that I think are worth noting, because their ADP is pretty decent. Like, I don't mind it. AJ Dillon at RB39.
Yes.
Listen, we're talking about Jamal Williams going to Detroit, and while he very well may be the value relative to Swift, I have my kind of doubts. I don't think he's a bad pick. I just think I think Swift has a higher kind of floor ceiling combination. But remember, Williams was playing on a lot of pass downs. He was getting receiving work, and he was mixing in terms of carries. So whatever Aaron Jones feels that Williams was doing, like if Aaron Jones is going to get more passing game usage, AJ Dillon's going to fill in, then make up the difference. And this was essentially a 60-40 split, Jones and Williams. Sometimes it got closer to even 55-45 in certain games. And AJ Dillon, a guy they drafted on day 2 last season, I think this is the time when they unleash him. And he's one injury away from really being in just the driver's seat, because behind him, there's just Kylan Hill. We know the Packers haven't really had confidence in any other running back. So, I think Dillon turns into a RB1 and kind of inherits Jones value anytime Jones goes down, but may even offer standalone flex value. So I like that pick at 39. And then Tony Pollard, seems like we talk about him every year, but word out of camp is he is going to get more receiving usage. And another guy, we're excited about this Dallas offense. And Pollard's kind of the forgotten guy. It's Zeke and the 3 receivers. We don't know what's going to happen at tight end, but this could be a bad defense yet again. It could be a high volume pass offense. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Pollard's best season yet, especially Zeke, coming off the down year. We'll see if that affects anything, but pretty decent value pick here with even some outside, an outside chance at some standalone value at RB.
I thought you were going to drop down to 53 and Chuba Hubbard. I mean the backup behind Christian McCaffrey, man. And if everybody remembers, if paid attention to college, if Hubbard came out 2 years ago instead of this past year, people were talking about him as a first rounder. And obviously we cooled off from what his realistic expectation should be. But again, if you look, that's another backfield. Look behind Hubbard and tell me who's going to contend with Hubbard for touches if Christian McCaffrey gets hurt again.
No, I love it. That was going to be we're going to go to deep sleepers in just a bit, but that's I mean, we saw how valuable
you're super deep.
we saw how valuable the backup to Christian McCaffrey was last season. You know, if you paid attention, you know, Reggie Bonifant, I think coming into early in the offseason was thought to be it, but eventually Mike Davis kind of emerged if you paid attention to the camp report. So I think Hubbard is a guy to monitor most definitely. And Boston Scott, Boston Scott, it's just kind of by default, right? It's a new coaching staff. We're talking about a committee with him and Miles Sanders. So why am I going to take Miles Sanders inside the top 20 when I could get Boston Scott as the 75th running back? I'm not saying I take him all the time. I'm just saying, here's a guy who you can essentially get for free that his team is talking about a significant role for him. So I think he's interesting. I think Darrington Evans is interesting headed into year 2 in Tennessee as well, just because so many carries in front of him if Derrick Henry ever misses time. So
yeah, but that's never going to happen.
Hey, we thought that about McCaffrey. I mean, after these 300 plus carry seasons, you got to be careful.
Derrick Henry is built different. He's never getting hurt.
Thank you. Thank you. And everybody's out there acting like it's 5 straight seasons of 350 carries. He's only carried the ball 300 times 2 years in a row. If Derrick Henry gets hurt, thank you, Sean. If Derrick Henry gets hurt, it's because a linebacker fell into his knee sideways and it was a freak injury. Derrick Henry, 0 concerns. He's in my top 4. I'm so glad you brought that up, Sean.
Yeah, I mean, Derrick Henry, I actually just took him today in a salary cap league, 100-hour cap league. I got Kamara and Derrick Henry and just had to kind of build scrubs around those guys. But love Henry, just saying. Darrington Evans, another cheap guy.
I take
receiving usage, and if Henry ever goes down, even if he misses a game or two, I think you're getting a really good value there. So let's switch gears a little bit because we've been doing a bunch of these podcasts. We're on the new feed. Jake, we know you're a really sharp guy all around, so we're gonna go not just running back, but every position. Who are your top mid-round targets at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end?
You want me to run through all of them at the same time, just to clarify and make sure, or do you want me?
Yeah,
to
you can just go kind of rapid fire. Just
okay.
You don't have to, go in depth.
Yeah, okay, rapid fire, easy. All right, I know there's been a hesitancy with Joe Burrow doesn't look great so far, and he's tentative, and we still have time, obviously, to adjust. But as of right now, my initial projection spat out Joe Burrow as leading the league in pass attempts, which wouldn't shock me at all. Averaged 40 a game last year before getting hurt. And one thing about it, like I said, we want volume at our positions. If you look at what he did on a pass attempts yards basis, he's actually set up for positive regression with the touchdown department of where he was with last year. And now you add Chase to that receiving crew. I love Joe Burrow. I told you I was saving Michael Carter. This is Michael Carter time. In the draft, I had him on the same tier as Javonte Williams, and everybody called me crazy. I told Chris before we did this show, Sean, I was like, I have the receipts for everybody that told me that I was crazy, and now everybody's coming on to the Michael Carter bandwagon. There's still room. I'm welcoming you on the bandwagon, but don't pretend like you were here the entire time. Michael Carter is in the Austin Eckler mold. He doesn't need to carry the ball 20 times a game because he's that dynamic in that 14 to 17, 18 touch per game. I love Carter in that backfield. I said as soon as they drafted him, he was the best talent and would have a great season. This is a well-known name, but Brandon Cooks, I don't care who the quarterback is. Put me at quarterback. 130, 140 targets, volume for Brandon Cooks, and now you're pushing him down to wide receiver 3 territory, who, by the way, Brandon Cooks has never not finished as a top 15 wide receiver outside the year he got hurt, for everybody out there. So I don't care that there's no Deshaun Watson. I'm taking Brandon Cooks. And then my 2 favorites at tight end. Everybody wanted Higbee last year because of what he did to finish the year before that. Well, guess what? Everett's off in Seattle. Now he's got Matthew Stafford at quarterback. And then similarly, in a different fashion, Adam Trotman, who, when I talked about him coming out of college, was a matchup problem in the passing game, but being a tight end, needed some time to develop in the NFL, could be the number 2 receiving option. Well, number 3, I factored in Alvin Kamara, but number 2 receiver that coming out of the backfield for that team. I think Troutman is very much set to be a potential top 10 tight end this year.
Love it. Sean, who are your mid-round targets for 2021?
So my mid-round targets are at quarterback, Jaylen Hurts. I mean, that's the latest you can get a QB with legit QB1 upside, so I love taking him there. Kareem Hunt, I already mentioned him, offers an insanely high floor ceiling combo. I know Nick Chubb is a threat to his workload, but Hunt should be able to return value even if Chubb plays all season and has top 5 upside when Chubb is out of the lineup. I say this every year, never underestimate Robbie Anderson. So I love him in the mid rounds at wide receiver. He's reuniting with Sam Darnold. They already have great chemistry, so I love him. You can get him as your wide receiver 3 or even on your bench. That's how low he's going. And then tight end, tight end TJ Hawkinson. He allows you to attack other positions early in the draft and still land an elite tight end 1, in my opinion, in rounds 5 and 6. He's in my optimal draft strategy when it comes to tight end. So he's my most valuable tight end to draft in the mid rounds.
Love it. For me, my mid-round targets in 2021 at quarterback, you've heard this one before, Jaylen Hurts. Again, I think, Sean, you put it perfectly. This guy has legit QB1 upside, and he's going oftentimes outside the top 10 quarterbacks. Yes, there's a little bit of risk, but there's also massive upside, and there is not much downside, I think, at where he is being picked. At running back, I love me some Daryl Henderson and some Chris Carson, 2 guys that I think will push for touches in the high teens on a weekly basis on 2 of the better offenses in the National Football League. At wide receiver, I love the second-year breakout potential for Chase Claypool. He essentially broke out already last year, but he's kind of a poor man's CeeDee Lamb in that entering year 2, we are expecting a jump in routes run. Claypool was generally in the 60-70% routes run range as a rookie. If he starts playing 80-90% and he's on the field in 3 wide sets every down, along with Deontay and Juju, he is going to blow up. And obligatory Robbie Anderson mention, again, stealing Sean's thunder with that, and with TJ Hawkinson, because he's the last tight end in the second tier of tight end 1s. Once he's off the board, that usually means that I'm just waiting to the end. So I love him, and I love the fit with Jared Goff. Goff doesn't like to throw it downfield. Goff was the guy that jammed it into Tyler Higbee so much in 2019. He's just a guy that, and for a team that is expected to be one of the league's worst. So Goff is a guy that's going to target, I think, the tight end anyway. There's not really many wide receivers to speak of. You have a bad team with passing game scripts. You have a tight end entering year 3. I see some potential here for a tight end 1, tight end 2 overall season if some things break right and Detroit is an absolute mess and just has to pass all the time. So love me some TJ Hawkinson. Now let's go on to everyone's favorite, sleepers. Jake, who are your top sleepers at each position? And we're defining sleepers as players not currently being drafted as fantasy starters that we think will finish as such.
Yeah, so a bit undervalued, or obviously the wealth of information that's out there nowadays. There's no such thing as sleepers anymore. But I'm gonna go with the kind of different route on a couple of these. But Daniel Jones at quarterback, and kind of pains me a little bit because as an organization, I want Gettleman gone, and I want to be able to root for my Giants again. But I can also evaluate when the opportunity is here. When you push Daniel Jones outside the top 20, and everybody seemingly he's part of my last year's trash article. That's why I do this every single year, is because people get really ticked off at players and don't want to go back to them because they got burned. Daniel Jones was inside the top 15 at ADP, on the fringe of a QB1 in a lot of drafts because of the rushing upside and because everybody was calling him the next Josh Allen, which we just do with every quarterback now, like there's been 50 Josh Allens. But Daniel Jones can run for 500 yards, a few touchdowns in the run game. And then on top of it, if he can just get a little bit back from 2 years ago, the promise that people saw with the addition of Galladay, put Shepard back in the slot, get a healthy Saquon Barkley, Daniel Jones with that rushing upside is what can push him back into that fringe QB1 territory. So now that he's going outside the top 20 quarterbacks, I'll take him. Damien Harris, for the Patriots. Everybody was always like, oh, you don't want to deal with the Belichick backfield. But go back to the days of Lawrence Maroney and Robert Edwards and Corey Dillon. Backfields are going to be accustomed to the coaching, but they will also adapt to the talent they have. Damien Harris is a good all-around talent where you can put him out there and not telegraph. Now, granted, not every single time James White is out there do they pass, and not every time Sony Michel is out there do they run. But Damien Harris kind of puts the defense on a little bit more of their heels of being able to do both. And I think that Harris gives them that weapon where you could see Harris finally giving us that not solidarity, but that confidence in the running back behind Belichick. So I like Harris. Marvin Jones at wide receiver, the most disrespected wide receiver in fantasy for however many years now. And the reason I put him there is because I am a DJ Shark fan who is hurt right now and not getting reps with Lawrence. And if you're talking about a touchdown maker with Lawrence coming to the NFL, I think Marvin Jones could find his way inside the top 20, even inside the top 15 if Shark doesn't bounce back this season. And then my boy, going back to tight ends that could break out in the second year is Cole Kmet, who I think finally will kick Jimmy Graham to the curb. Maybe similar to what Sean was saying with Trey Sermon, is maybe not at the beginning with week 1, 2, 3, or 4 right there, but by the second half of the season, Cole Kmet should be the tight end we trust for the Bears finally this year.
Sean, how about you? What sleepers are you targeting?
So the sleepers I'm targeting are guys that, you're drafting for your bench to start the season, but I think can be huge come fantasy playoff time. And no one fits that better than Trey Lance. When you just look at the fantasy playoff schedule for the 49ers, this is assuming that Trey Lance eventually overtakes Jimmy G, which I'm betting on. They play the Falcons, Titans, and Texans to close out the fantasy football season. So you want to draft Trey Lance specifically to dominate your fantasy playoffs like we did with Jaylen Hurts last year. And then at running back, same thing, Trey Sermon. You're not drafting him to start week 1 because he's probably not going to offer much value. But as the season goes, he's going to overtake Raheem Mozart at some point. The 49ers didn't draft him in the 3rd round to back up Raheem Mozart for too long. So again, he's going to offer you a ton of value come fantasy playoff time. So that's why I love loading up on him. And then Mike Williams, I talk about him every time we talk about wide receiver sleepers. I love him heading into Justin Herbert's year 2, where Justin Herbert's going to he's only going to get better. Mike Williams should thrive in offensive coordinator Joe Lombardi's scheme. He comes from the Sean Payton coaching tree, and he's already said that Mike Williams be his X receiver. That is the Michael Thomas role. So I think Mike Williams will have his best season yet, and you'll be starting him by the end of the season. And then Irv Smith. I love taking Irv Smith as a late round flyer. He's usually the tight end 13 off the board, but I think he has legit, top 5 upside, because we already saw that last year without Kyle Rudolph in lineup in weeks 14 through 17. He finishes the tight end 4. He's essentially the number 3 wide receiver in this offense. So I love getting Irv Smith as my last, towards the end of the draft.
Yeah, Irv Smith is finally unlocked with Kyle Rudolph gone. For me, sleepers, quarterback, I'm going with Zach Wilson. I really like Zach. I think he can throw the ball downfield. I think that with Adam Gase gone, a lot of people may shy away from the uncertainty, but this is a whole new offense. We talked about Carter. You have Corey Davis. You have Elijah Moore. You still have Crowder. You have a versatile guy in Keelan Cole, and your high pick from last year, Denzel Mims, is all the way down there at 3rd string. So they do have some weapons here. I think Wilson can move around a little bit. He can throw it deep. So, and this Jets team could be bad. I don't think they really addressed the cornerback situation the way they should have. So you could have some passing game scripts there too. So like Zach Wilson at running back, AJ Dillon. This is the year. Last year, he was still blocked by Jamal Williams. They drafted him on day 2 last year. Williams, they let go. Now Dillon is maybe already locked into a approaching double-digit touch role, given how they used and split Jones and Williams last year. And then if Aaron Jones goes down, I think Dillon is a surefire number 1 running back. So love AJ Dillon this year. At wide receiver, Nicole Hardman, a guy that I'm finally expecting to get into the 70s and 80% on a weekly basis in his snap rate. He's a guy that's really going to have to take a step forward without Sammy Watkins this year. I also like Gabriel Davis in Buffalo. this is a year 2 breakout guy who you might look up, and Davis is the number 2 target on the Buffalo Bills. He had 7 touchdowns last year, a couple more called back. He, top 2 in red zone targets for the Bills, and he's also targeted on average 17 yards downfield. So he's getting high leverage targets from one of the better fantasy quarterbacks in the league in Josh Allen. So really like Gabriel Davis. I think he is the guy that's going to blow. I don't think Emmanuel Sanders is going to be as much of a factor as people think. And let's remember, him and Beasley are both on the wrong side of 30. And one more wide receiver, another Jet, since I'm going with Zach Wilson, Elijah Moore. This guy has number 1, I think, wide receiver potential for the Jets. We thought he was just going to be a slot guy, wondering if Crowder was going to kind of block his way, but he's been playing on the outside. He can play any position. He is a talented, really talented guy who's been shining at camp. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Moore lead the Jets in targets this year. So like him. And at tight end, Jake, you already mentioned it, Tyler Higbee. I think he's a guy that's starting to move up people's boards, but you look at this Rams team, and I think there's a lot of value here because you still have Sean McVay. Let's remember what he did for Jared Goff. And now remember that he has a quarterback he trusts. They're going to be able to open up the offense a little more. And Gerald Everett is no longer here. So I think you're going to see Higbee approach the snap and route participation rates that we saw when he was just going absolutely bonkers at the end of the 2019 season. I'm not saying we're getting a repeat of that, but I'm saying there's opportunity here, especially with Akers down. I think the Rams could be a very pass-heavy team. Remember, it was a couple years ago, Jared Goff threw for 4,600 yards and left some on the table. So love Tyler Higbee as a tight end sleeper in 2021. All right, man. That was a lot. This is a great podcast on the Fantasy Flex's new feed. Jake, thank you so much for joining us, man. Really, really enjoy and appreciate your insights. Please tell everyone where they can find you and what you're up to these next few weeks heading into the season.
Yeah, The Athletic is where all the columns are. If you see the new show All in Football on Bets TV, you can check that out, which, by the way, also, if you want a free month to The Athletic, you go to theathletic.com/Bets TV, so you get a free first month, and you can complain about my rankings and my comments. You can yell at me over there for free, so have fun doing that. But it's funny we're talking about a lot of these players because some of the ones you touched on, some of the ones Sean did, and myself, I have a column coming out this week. It's Last Year's Trash. It's one of my favorite articles to talk about because people get burned and they get so angry and never want to draft that guy again. That's some of the best values you can find. So that's what's coming out. But as you mentioned, at Only Kid, I tweet all this stuff out. That's the easiest way to find it, honestly.
Absolutely. Thank you so much again. We'll be looking out for that. Definitely. Really, really enjoy reading your work. Always top of the line insight. In my opinion, you guys can find Sean on Twitter at @the_oddsmaker. You can find me on Twitter at Chris Raybon, and be sure to check out all of our fantasy content and our draft tool at actionnetwork.com. This has been the Fantasy Flex. Till next time, let's get this shmoney.